ESPN may fight the Big Ten and the SEC about their plans for college football playoff expansion. What? I'll explain. Locked on Big Ten starts right now.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Big Ten. I'm Craig Sheeman, 40 years as a sports talk show host and play-by-play announcer. And I want to thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hit that free subscribe button down below while you're checking us out. We'd always appreciate that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, ESPN pushback against the Big Ten and SEC. Paul Finebaum pushback against the Big Ten and SEC. And is the USC-Notre Dame rivalry coming to an end? Whoa, you didn't expect that, did you? Plus, our power rankings here in the middle of the week. But first, the 10 FBS conferences and Notre Dame, they met in Dallas yesterday to discuss the future of the college football playoffs, whether to expand the field, seedings, automatic qualifiers for the Big Ten and SEC. The meeting lasted 7 hours, and everybody scurried to catch their flights home. The main issue here was seedings. I think they all kind of agree we really need to dial in on that. Remember, any playoff changes that happen here for the 2025 season into January 2026 has to be a unanimous vote by all 11 people here. Then next year, it's wide open. It doesn't require a unanimous vote, and now then the Big Ten and the SEC will have more power. But looking at the seedings, they want to. I think there's some talk about lining it up more with the playoff committee's rankings. The top 4 seedings will get the buys instead of the top 4 conference champions. I mean, you got number 9 ranked Boise State in the Mountain West getting a bye, one of the 4 buys. Big 12, 12th ranked Arizona State get a bye. I think there's some consensus that they would like to eliminate that. But at the end of the meeting yesterday, they just kicked the can down the road a little bit. They all wanted more information. They wanted more projections. They are going to meet again in a month, probably virtually, because March Madness and these guys are all busy with basketball. But that was the issue. Nothing was decided on expansion or automatic qualifiers that the Big Ten and the SEC want. One get 3 or 4 teams each in the playoffs. So that's where we're at right now. Basically, nothing happened yesterday, but they are going to dial in on the seedings for this year's playoffs. Again, nothing has been decided, but that's where we're at right now. The big lead up to all this, of course, were the private meetings last week with Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti and SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey to make sure that they were all on the same page moving forward 2026 and on, and giving the Big Ten and the SEC more power, more teams, more money, everything. And basically bull rush the rest of college football with what they want, the Big Ten and the SEC, or else they could always threaten to leave, move forward with their Big Ten SEC super conference in the future. We've talked about that numerous times here on this podcast. We're not there yet. But their plan from their pre-meeting last week was presented as a shared, evolving vision for the college football playoff. Now, we predicted there would be some pushback from other conferences who are saying, why should we give all these breaks and automatic qualifiers in the future to the Big Ten and the SEC just because they're the Big Ten and the SEC? We should point out that CBS is reporting that Petitti and Sankey followed up their little pre-meeting last week with a conference call this past weekend with the Big 12 and the ACC, presumably to give them a heads up with how they're thinking with their plans and their intentions moving forward. Other conferences were left in the dark on that conference call this past weekend. I presume that was all talked about yesterday when they were all face-to-face. Other conferences may or may not have any choice but to accept the fact that they have to go along with whatever is planned for 2026 and beyond. Is there anybody else out there powerful enough to stop the Big Ten and the SEC from taking this whole thing over moving forward? What about ESPN? according to John Wilner of the San Jose Mercury News, ESPN is not on board with Petitti's and Sankey's ideas for the rest of college football and the future of the playoffs. In fact, they may be staunchly opposed, quote unquote. So keep in mind, ESPN is the broadcast rights holder for all the playoffs and the national championship, and their contract it was this past year, currently this year, and then kind of a new deal kind of kicks in 2026 to 2031 to air the playoffs. And also in that language is they will continue to air these playoffs with a field of 12 or 14 teams. All right. Now, while the Big Ten and the SEC are looking for bigger payouts as well, ESPN is not obligated to increase the TV money payouts if the field expands to 14 or to 16. That would be making it even harder for it to be 16. Nowhere in the contract does it allow for 16 teams through 2031. So, and that's been a lot of the talk here lately. So that would take away some of the leverage of the conferences who may want to expand the field, not to 14, but to 16. If they are going to accept the Big Ten and the SEC's demands for 4 automatic qualifiers each, so 8 of the 12 spots as we are, or 14, they may say, hey, man, we got to get more teams, so more spots so we can get our teams in here as well. That's what's going to keep this thing growing. But ESPN's like, look, man, we're only contracted to do a 12-team or 14-team playoff, and we're certainly not going to pay more money for a 16-team playoff. And there's some other issues as well that we'll get to. But if, again, if the Power 2 are going to hog up 8 of the spots, the other conferences are looking for their path in as well. And ESPN also fears that too many automatic qualifiers would diminish the importance of big regular season games. And they're right about that. Look, I mean, I've talked about this. The more we expand these playoffs, the more insignificant the regular season becomes. You're allowed 2 and 3 and 4 losses. And, we're just going to rematch later in the playoffs. They're right. They are diminishing the regular season. And ESPN carries games in the regular season. And they don't want those diminished. And also, ESPN fears alienating non-Big Ten and non-SEC regions throughout the country, although I will argue that those 2 conferences pretty much cover the entire country geographically at this point. But there's also the matter of airing more playoff games if we do expand to 14, and again, 16 looks unlikely. ESPN already had to farm out a bunch of its games to TNT last year. Remember that? You remember the first rounds? The games were on TNT. They weren't on ESPN because ESPN has a very busy broadcast schedule. Again, they're not too excited about adding more teams to the playoffs. Now they got more log jams with their programming. They don't want to farm more college football playoff games to other networks like TNT because they have NFL commitments. And in fact, I think last year under the 12-game format, 2 of the 4 opening round playoffs faced head-to-head competition with the NFL, and expanding the college football playoff field would challenge these windows. Remember, at that time of year, the NFL, they keep expanding. They got Thursday night. They got Saturday night. They got Sunday. They got Monday. Actually, they do Saturday afternoon. There are fewer broadcast blocks to squeeze in more additional college football playoff games. So a lot still needs to be ironed out regarding all this. One other item, by the way, from this article that we were telling you about from the Mercury News, the January 2029 championship game is supposed to be in Dallas at Jerry's World, Jerry Jones, AT&T Stadium. But there's planned construction, massive construction in the area. It's going to make it impossible to hold the event then. So now Tampa is expected to be the host of the title game on that day. Just a little sidebar there. But to tidy up all these plans, these conference commissioners and Notre Dame, they plan to meet again next month. As I said at the top, probably going to be done virtually as they are collecting more data on what it would be like to change the seeding process of the 12 teams this year. And then all this other stuff we're talking about would be from 2026 and beyond. And then the college football playoffs board of managers They're also scheduled to meet May 6th. I would presume that they would have to have a decision on seeding for the 2025-26 playoffs by then. That's my best bet right there. So mark your calendars for that. Any thoughts and comments? We'd love to hear from you. If you were a commissioner, what would your ideal format be? I already know what mine is, and we're not going backward. My opinion, if you're new to this podcast, everydayers will know this. We need to go back to 4 playoff teams. That's it. We were good at 4. I was anti-expansion to begin with. I would just take the 4 Power 4 conference champions from their championship games. Boom, you got playoff spots. Let's do a playoff. And I know that doesn't help Group of 5, but in my opinion, they're not winning a national championship anyway. And I know there's always the what about Notre Dame argument. I don't care. That would force Notre Dame to get into a conference in order to be eligible for the playoffs. That's my plan. If I were a king of the world or just commissioner of college football, that's what I would do. What would you do? Let me know. Hit me up with the comments. Would always love to hear from you guys. Hey, be sure to subscribe for free. Hit that button and follow Locked On Big Ten for free wherever you get your podcast. That way you'll get the latest episode of Locked On Big Ten as soon as it becomes available each and every day. And if you don't also mind, share, follow, and like Locked On Big Ten. Make a comment, if you will, if you're watching on YouTube as well. And don't forget to check out our website, talkbig10.com, number 10, talkbig10.com. All of our podcasts go there. We group them by team. We group them by chronological order as well. You can go back and check out yesterday's podcast if you missed it. It was good. And we also have a link to your favorite Big Ten school if you want to get some school merchandise, shirts, hats, T-shirts, all that from your favorite Big Ten school right there at talkbig10.com. So check all that out as well. We still have plenty of things we need to talk about here on this podcast here before we're done. First of all, signs are pointing toward USC and Notre Dame, their rivalry, calling it quits. I'll tell you what we know. Plus, I'm also curious what college football pundit Paul Finebaum thinks about the Big Ten and the SEC power play for the college football playoffs, because, he's very anti-Big Ten and he's very pro-SEC. Now they're in bed together. What does Finey say? We'll do all that coming up. We'll have your answers plus our power rankings in just a little bit as well, right here on Locked On Big Ten. Watching games is exciting, but it's even more exciting if you got a little action on it. That's why I'm telling you about FanDuel. How about the NBA, for example? The action's really getting going here as we're making the drive to the playoffs, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off, you can make a bet on a fourth quarter comeback. You can just stay in the action, in-game action here. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into same-game parlays. It's fantastic. So check it out. They've got an app that's super easy to use. You get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com today and join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA. I want to thank everybody for making Locked On Big Ten your first listen each and every day, especially you everydayers out there. Meanwhile, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and share, follow, and like Locked On Big Ten, your team every day. And check out our website, talkbig10.com, for podcasts and merchandise. We're going to discuss the future of the USC-Notre Dame football rivalry and whether its days are numbered in a minute. But first, ESPN's college football talking head, Paul Finebaum, always has something to say. And it's usually something bad about the Big Ten and something good about the SEC. So what does he think about his beloved SEC getting into bed with the Big Ten and bull rushing the rest of college football by reserving automatic qualifiers and the future growth and expansion of the college football playoffs? What does he think about all that? Something's got to give. These two conferences are together. Finebaum admits that both conferences dominate college football, but he cautions the Big Ten and the SEC from overreaching their leverage when it comes to this topic of expanding the playoff field and having more automatic qualifiers, having 4 teams each in the college football playoffs. He acknowledges that both conferences have a problem with the current seeding format of the playoffs, which we discussed earlier in our first segment. And of course, there was the meeting in Dallas yesterday among the conference commissioners. Again, you got 12th ranked teams getting a bye. You can't do that anymore. I think they'll get that solved. I think Finey thinks that as well. But he said it would be completely wrong, quote unquote, to guarantee 3 spots each to the SEC and the Big Ten. It's going to be 4, by the way, but these are his words, not mine. And he says there's something inherently wrong with stacking the deck before the season even starts and before the games are even played. And he's probably right about that. I mean, what if a Power 2 conference has a bad year or a down year? And they're still guaranteed a 4th team in the playoffs, for example. There's a possibility that an 8-4 team with a bad loss to Vanderbilt might get into the playoffs, maybe. Oh, wait, the SEC did have a bad down season this year. And they did have one of the better teams lose to Vandy, but they did not make the playoffs, probably because of that. But anyway, with all this going on, it certainly was fun to watch him squirm a little bit a month ago and actually have to admit that the Big Ten is better than the SEC in college football. Big Ten's running college football right now. But he had a little humble pie toward his SEC on that. I wonder if this were 3 years ago when the SEC did dominate college football, if he'd be calling for more SEC teams to be allowed into the playoffs. I think he would. It's always dangerous to put words in other people's mouths. But I think if, we were back in the heyday just a couple of years ago when the SEC was dominating, he'd be going, of course, the SEC should get all these teams in. Of course. But we'll never know. Meanwhile, here in Big Ten country, we're partial to the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry. Greatest rivalry in sports. However, we do have to admit that Big Ten newcomer USC and the rivalry against Notre Dame is pretty good. It's on the short list. They've been playing for almost 100 years. They've met every year since World War II, with the exception of the COVID year. But with all these changes in college football and USC now being a member of the Big Ten, the question is, will this rivalry continue? Of course, many USC and Notre Dame fans are like, yeah, of course it will. This is a rival. We're not stopping this, right? Yeah, but other stuff may get in the way. USC Athletic Director Jennifer Cohen talked about the rivalry in a recent interview with The Athletic, and it was pretty easy to read in between the lines with what she said. She acknowledged that the rivalry is important to the fans and the schools, but she hedged on saying that the rivalry will continue. She said, quote, in an ideal world, we're going to keep playing each other, unquote. All right. Face value is like, all right, the intent here is to keep playing each other. But I didn't like how she phrased it, in an ideal world. This isn't an ideal world. We got change every day going on, particularly in college football. And that to me sounded like she was leaving the door open, that there have been discussions that maybe this series is going to end. She went on to say, quote, with that being said, the landscape has changed dramatically, quote unquote. So in an ideal world, we'd like to play, but that being said, the landscape's changing. What does that mean? That sounds like to me, she's thinking this series is not going to go on forever. It doesn't make sense, according to her. Then she listed a whole bunch of reasons why it's difficult to continue the USC-Notre Dame rivalry. So, all right, we're already flying back and forth across the country every single week now with conference play. She listed the expansion of the college football playoffs and access to those playoffs and how teams are selected and seeded, and then said that's the background that USC and Notre Dame continue to have discussions about with this series, and that both continue to evaluate what is best moving forward. There may be a point where USC says, well, we can't get to the playoffs, or we can't grab a seed in the playoffs. If we keep playing Notre Dame, maybe it's a loss we don't want to risk because we got 4 other ranked teams on the Big Ten schedule. It's a lot of stuff. She's leaving the door open for this to end. She did finish up by saying, we are excited to go back to South Bend next year. Okay, well, we know that they're going to South Bend next year. Very politically safe answer. Very kick the can down the road type of answer. She left every door open in her answer. She did not say, yeah, sure, USC and Notre Dame are always going to play. We're going to play for another 100 years. She did not say that. Not even close. So for right now, this series is only scheduled through 2026. After that, there's a real possibility that this series could end. Now, before Trojan fans light me up on the comment section and say ending this series is impossible, it'll never happen, that's crazy, you don't know what you're talking about, I'll ask you this. A few years ago, just a couple years ago, did you think USC would be in the Big Ten? Not one of you. Not one of you. Did you think we have a 12-team playoff? For those that remember the 2-team BCS and the 4-team college football playoff, did you think we have 12 teams in the playoffs? No. Nobody thought that. Things happen. Things change quickly, including the possibility of losing this rivalry game. Look, Texas and Texas A&M, they ended their series before they both ended up in the SEC together. It could happen. It could happen. Think about it. All right, we got some college basketball I want to tell you about for tonight, Wednesday night. 8th-ranked Michigan State, still basking in the glory of their big win over Michigan, taking on 16-seed Maryland. Hey, you want to see where we got them ranked in our power rankings? Come back on Mill. That game tonight is at 6:30, Big Ten Network. If you haven't seen Maryland play, they got 6'10" freshman Derek Queen. He's a 16-9 guy, 16 points, 9 rebounds per game. This is why Maryland's good. Penn State is at Indiana. That's at 8:30 Eastern on the Big Ten Network, coming off their big win over Purdue over the weekend, Indiana. And Ohio State is at USC. That's at 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific. That'll be on the Big Ten Network. As far as the women go, got some action here on Wednesday night tonight. Top 25 matchup, 23rd ranked Michigan State is at 12th ranked Ohio State. That's at 7 o'clock Eastern on Big Ten Plus. Iowa's at Michigan, 7 o'clock Eastern, Big Ten Plus. And number 2, UCLA at Wisconsin, 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific on Peacock. And then Washington is at Minnesota. That's at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific on Big Ten Plus. All right, a lot of basketball to check out here tonight. Speaking of basketball, it's the middle of the week. So we are going to have our power rankings for men's basketball in the Big Ten. That's all coming up here in 1 minute on Locked On Big Ten. We'll see where your team stacks up. All right, time now for our weekly power rankings here on Locked On Big Ten. We're going to look at men's basketball. I'm going to put them up here. If you're on audio only, no problem. I'll describe what we're putting on screen here. We'll start off with our first 10. Look, we got to put Michigan State number 1. That win over Michigan last week. I think we had, I can't remember. I think we had Michigan number 1 last week. Yeah, we got to flip them. So Michigan State number 1. I'm putting Maryland at number 2. I just talked up Derek Queen. Coach Kevin Willard got a nice balanced attack with his team, both offense and defense. I think they're a top 20 offense and top 20 defense together. They're a good basketball team. I didn't drop Michigan too far. We're going to put them at number 3. They're still good. They got the rematch with Michigan State coming up. Dusty May got his contract extension. They got the Twin Tower 7-footers of Wolf and Golden. Michigan's not going anywhere. They're not falling too far. I got Wisconsin at number 4. And look, they had that loss to Oregon. I think that was more of a one-off. Look, Oregon had to hit an amazing 3-pointer to send the game into overtime. John Tonje, 40% 3-point shooter, 20 points per game for the Badgers. I don't think they're going anywhere as well. The Purdue Boilermakers might be lucky to be at number 5 in this poll. They could be lower. You know, that loss to Indiana, Purdue only scored 21 points in the second half. Purdue's like a top 8 offensive team in the country, and they only scored 21 points in the second half. But even more disturbing, that was their 4th straight loss. Has Matt Painter ever lost 4 straight games? So they got to get it together. They could be lower than 5. I think 5 is generous right now with the way they're playing. Number 6, I got UCLA. You know, they had their 7-game winning streak, and then 9-2 over 11 games. They beat Ohio State on Sunday. It was Bill Walton night. Everybody's wearing tie-dyes. It was great. I got Oregon at number 7. Dana Altman, they were good early. They slumped. I see some signs maybe with that win over Wisconsin that they're coming back, heating back up a little bit, maybe. Illinois at number 8 just came off their worst loss like ever. They got beat by Duke by 43 points. Look, they've had a flu bug. They've had injuries. This was on the national stage at Madison Square Garden. That was embarrassing. I got them dropped to number 8. And, anytime we've done these rankings all season long, Illinois, inconsistent. Sometimes they were ranked, sometimes they weren't. It's just sometimes they're good, sometimes they're slumping. Not very consistent team this year, I will say that. And again, they've got a lot of challenges right now with injuries and illness. I got the Indiana Hoosiers at number 9. They've still struggled. They've still lost a lot of games lately, but they got 2 quad 1 wins in the last week or so. They won at Michigan State. They beat Purdue. They're back in the mix for March Madness. I believe they're in the first 4 out, second team out, barely just on the outside. They are the epitome of a bubble team right now. They have some work to do. Got Ohio State at 10. Again, coming off that loss to UCLA. Nebraska, are they showing signs of heating up? I got them at 11. They got a win over Illinois, but again, Illinois got problems. They got the win over Oregon. Minnesota at 12. Again, up and down with their forgot to switch that over. So Nebraska at 11, Minnesota at 12. Had some good wins this year, but not enough. USC at number 13, and I got Northwestern at 14, and then Iowa. Injuries and no defense. They're gonna probably have a coaching change too, right here at the end of the year. Iowa and Indiana. Rutgers. I mentioned this last week. I don't know how you have 2 top 5, maybe top 3 NBA lottery picks and Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, and we're just not figuring it out. I got Washington at 17. Penn State has really struggled. Got them at 18. There you have it. Did we get them all right? Let me know. Did I rank your team too high, too low? Let me know in the comments section. Would love to hear from you. Always love to hear from you. There are many ways for you to interact with us here at Locked On Big Ten, at Twitter or X, at Talk Big Ten number 10. See that on the bottom if you're on video. Also our website, also on the bottom. Talk Big Ten. That's the number 10, talkbig10.com. All of our podcasts go there. Plus, you can buy your favorite team's merchandise, get your school spirit up for March Madness. Hey, be sure to subscribe if you don't mind. Before you go, hit that button. It's free. And follow this podcast right now on your favorite podcast app. You get the latest episode of Locked On Big Ten as soon as it becomes available each and every day. Also, take a second listen for another episode of Locked On Big Ten, or a second or third listen with our friends at Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait until March. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. That'll do it. Always big news around the corner. We'll have it. We have news, breaking news, analysis, and opinion all under one Big Ten umbrella right here. We're the only podcast that does all of that here in one place. Thanks for checking us out. I can't wait till we meet again tomorrow. For Locked On Big Ten, I'm Craig Sheeman.